Hi there, this is Jacqueline with Nickel and Dime Decor. Thank you for being with me. I know you're probably tired of mug rugs, but you gotta get this one just in time for Mother's Day. Just in time. And I'm going to show you how to make it. So stay with me, okay? Thank you. Well, here are the components for the mug rug. I have a backing, and I cut it 7 by 10, which is going to be, a little bit bigger, but I just gave myself some leeway. This is my grid, I call it, that I made, and it's 6.5 by 4.5. And here's my little heart, and it's about 4-5 inches across. And I made myself a template so I would always have it. This is my piece that the heart is going to go on. It's a 6.5 inch square. And then I cut out a 6.5 inch batting for it. This will already have the batting underneath it when we sew the strips. Here is my piece of batting, big piece, to make this grid. And I was thinking, okay, let's get as many as we can out of these strips. So that's what I'm doing. Why not? My strips were 22 inches, so I'm going to make it 22 inches long. And then we will see how many hearts and how many 4.5 inch wide we can get. Why not make enough for 2 of them while we're at it? So all I did was take a jelly roll and cut the strips in half. So these are approximately 22 inches long. Then I folded them like this and cut them in half this way to get 1.25 inches. So you'll have 2 strips and so you'll have 1 strip for your next one. You'll have, as you make this, enough for 2 mug rugs. I have taken 11 strips. That's about exactly what I needed for this size. So I measured halfway, drew me a line with my friction pen, and laid my first strip on right against that line. And then I will just turn these over, of course, and sew 1/4 inch. And go on and proceed. Then you'll start on this side and sew your 1/4 inch until you've got all of your grid made. Then after it's all sewn, I'll come back and show you what it looks like. And we will see exactly how many things we can get. And all we're going to do is, what I would do is cut my 4.5 inch first and get 2 of them. And then we'll see how many hearts we can get out of it. You want at least 2, and I know you'll have enough room for 2, but you might be able to get 3. I mean, why not have it for another time? So Just remember, sometimes these get a little, you know, these strips are not, they are not precise by any means. Don't ever assume they are. So you kind of have to pay attention that you don't, you know, get a little warped with your line, because that can happen. I mean, if you examined mine very closely, you probably would see that it's not exact. But this is a project that exactness doesn't have to be. Then after we get this sewn and come back and cut it, that's the biggest job of the whole thing, is getting this grid made. And then after that, it takes little of no time. And then what I like to do is cut my heating bond and cut me a little heart and put it on the back, because as you're sewing, and I like to turn mine kind of whoppy-jawed. I think it looks cuter than being straight across. Now you do whatever. The pattern shows it to be just up and down, just like that. And I guess we'll try it. The other one I made, I did it, you know, I angled it. But we'll try it this time. And then with your heating bond on there, adhere it, because we're going to sew it on the machine. I'm going to use a hot pink thread, and we're going to do a button blanket stitch all the way around. And just kind of measure, make sure it's even, you know, so centered, you know, as best you can. Because remember, you're going to have a seam right here. When we join these two pieces, we're going to have a seam right here. So you've got to remember that. And you're going to have your binding over here, but it doesn't take away, it adds a little. So remember that, to get this over just a little bit more over to this side, to allow for that seam. You got a 1/4 inch seam right here, so just remember to consider that when you're trying to get it centered. Alrighty, I'm gonna sew these strips together, because there's no need for you to watch. And when I get through, well, we'll come back and we'll see. And I know I've told you before in other videos, but this friction pin is what you want to have. It's invaluable, because it just presses right off. No problem whatsoever. Friction from Pilot. Alrighty, be right back. Okay, I've got my grid done, and I wanted to tell you that as I sewed each strip, I pressed them. You could finger press, but this batting stretches real bad, and so I just pressed it, you know, kind of softly. Now, I'm ready to see how many. I have put my 4.5 inches on here. And, you know, you have a straight line right here on your ruler, and I've lined it up with my seam. And I'm ready to cut one of our 4.5 inches, because I know I want 2 of them. And then we'll see how many, what else we get out of it. And we'll cut the length and everything in a minute. But we're just getting our 4.5 inch. And just be sure, like I said, that you don't stretch too much, because A lot of these are on the bias, kind of, and you have to be careful. All right, there's our 2 4.5 inch. Now let's see how many, if we can get, it looks like we might be able to get, let's turn it this way. There's one. You know, you could get another 4.5 inch. Let me see. And 2 hearts. But we know we want 2 hearts because, you know, that's for sure what we want. So let's go ahead and draw this and go around with and you know, I thought this would work to use my rotary cutter, but I don't want to cut my template, and I probably would. So I'm going to see, I'm just going to cut it with my scissors. Okay, that doesn't show up just real good, but I can see it enough to cut it out. And that's, put this back where it was, because that's not just real clear. Okay, I'm going to go ahead, I guess, and put it right. I kind of want it to be crooked. You know, I don't want my seams to be going across, so that's why I'm kind of putting it at an angle. And I bet you we're not going to have enough for a 4.5 inch strip. Let's see. We do. So you decide, do you want a 4.5 inch strip or do you want another heart? That's your decision and your call. Now, you can make this grid as wide as you want. If you want to try to get 3 of these Mugrugs out of your grid, you go for it. You can make it as many strips wide. You do not have to do 1 1/4 inch. You can do 1 1/2 inch, 1 3/4 inch. You can mix them. You can do it however you want. And then you might be able to get 3 different sets for 1 Mugrug. That makes so much sense to not make it as easy as possible on yourself. Okay, I'm going to cut these 2 hearts out and cut this other. I'm going to choose to do a 4.5, I think. And then we'll come back and then I'm going to even these up. And all you do is just take the one I have is my example, and just even it even-wise. so that you're not cutting off all of your top strip or all of your bottom. Get it where it's even, you know, so much. And eyeballing it, that looks like that's where I should cut it. And even that off. And then we'll be right back. Okay, I've got my heart positioned on here, but now I've got to lift it up and put this heating bond on it. So I'm going to draw me a grid, a line, so I know where to place it, because I've got it exactly where I want it. And you don't have to go all the way around it, just do the top. And that way I know exactly where to place it. And then, with the rough, shiny edges, place it on your batting, the back of it. And you have to hold it quite a bit because it doesn't adhere. Just, I mean, you know, this is thick. So, and I just got that messed up. So let me take it off. And hold it down 10-15 seconds. The other day, I very foolishly had it like this and was trying to adhere it, and it wouldn't stick for nothing. So use your old noggin and turn it the right way. Now we want to trim all of this excess off that we don't need around the paper, that is, not the fabric. And just, you know, so you don't have any of that sticking out. Okay, I think that's pretty good. Now, just take your pen once or twice and peel off the paper. And put it right back where it needs to be. Then I'm going to pick this up and press from this side because it works better. This just helps it stay put. You don't have to pin or anything for you to do your blanket stitch. Blanket stitch is so decorative and so pretty. It's my favorite stitch on my machine. Okay, I'm going to do that and be right back. But first, I want to tell you to put your backing on there before you do your blanket stitch. It helps the machine, since you got this thickness, you kind of want to match it with this other thickness, and it helps it do it more evenly around if you have that behind it, and you want that anyway. Now, I could go ahead and sew this and do my seam and do my backing on there at the same time. And you know, I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to sew this seam. I'm going to put my backing on, and then I'm going to do the blanket stitch and everything. There is our precious heart with the blanket stitch. And I know you can't tell, but it's puffy, kind of puffed out. Makes it real neat. Now all I'm going to do is go as close to the edge as possible with a straight stitch across each line. And then we will draw lines. This is what I did on the other one, and it worked out just fine. Just go from corner to corner and draw you a line. And I went a 1/2 inch over and drew another line. And you will just stitch on those lines. Don't stitch over your heart. Just make these, what I do is I go back and forth where I begin, 1 or 2 stitches to secure my stitch, because you're going to be cutting all of these. And then when you get to your heart here, go back and double back stitch a couple of times and secure it. Then jump down to here, just pull your thread down and start right here and back stitch a couple of times and then go. But every time that you come to a point where you're going to cut your thread, be sure and go back and forth a couple of times. And that's, you could, if you're industrious and you want to make this diagonal both ways. If you want to do it both ways, but I don't think that's necessary. So that's what I would do to quilt it. I'll get that done, and we'll be right back. Well, here she is. I did the stitching in pink. I just kept the pink on. I thought that showed up a lot better. Be sure and trim your threads and everything on the back, because it's usable for the back too. All they have to do is reverse it if they want to. I have a little bit of a kink right there, but you know what? I learned a long time ago not to worry about imperfections. Nobody will know it's there but me. Now we're ready for our binding. I am taking 2 of my strips, 2.5 Jelly Roll strips that I had previously cut in half. And this will give me more than enough for my binding. I needed 35 inches, and this will give me 42. So I'm good. I'm going to join them like I always do by drawing a straight line across from seam to seam. Sew it, press it, and then I'm going to press it together to make 1 1/4 inch for my binding. I'm not going to show you how to do the binding because I have a lot of videos that show you that. If you'll just look them up and go through them. But I will tell you to be sure and leave yourself plenty of tail and start about right here and that makes it, when we come back and we join it, we have lots of wiggle room to put up here to connect our seams. You'll be so glad that you do that. Have lots of tail. I always say from 5 to 6 inches extra, okay? Well, here we have, I've got the binding sewed on. Fits perfectly. If you'll look at my videos, I can't tell you exactly which ones they are, but almost all of them that I made a quilt, I do a thorough video on the binding. Some of the Mugrugs I do. But all we're going to do is just turn it, and like I say, I like to stitch mine down by hand. I just think it makes a beautiful finish. I didn't think I had used these two in my binding, in here, but I did. There it is. So, I will finish that, and we'll look at the finished product again. Well, here it is, our finished product. Thank you so much for staying with me, and I hope you learned something from the video, and I hope you'll go and make one for somebody very special. Now, this is the one we just finished, which isn't sewn, and it's a 1/2 inch, not as wide, and I like it better. You make it whatever really size that you want, but this is a finished 6 inch, and this was a 6 1/2. I think it balances it a little better. Thank you again for watching. God bless. Take care.